Welcome to another edition of Not Black or White. I'm Robert Young, and Jason O'Day is my co-host. And
Hello.
We've got Joshua Neilson here as our guest.
How's everyone doing?
Doing all right. How about you guys?
I'm doing good.
I'm doing fine.
So we're gonna talk about various things on our minds, and I understand that you are a man who is both involved in media and also interested in politics.
Yeah, it's really at the beginning stages at the moment, but I really want to take hold of the whole media platform, being a filmmaker, artist, actor of sorts, and really point out tropes in the political atmosphere with using filmmaking as a medium.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are you thinking maybe documentaries or storytelling?
More, I would say more like Black Mirror-esque, ethereal concepts.
Something more, I guess you could call artsy then.
Yeah.
Sounds like I like Black Mirror. That's
Okay.
a very interesting show, and a lot of it feels like it's coming true, to thankfully a limited extent, because some of those episodes are quite horrifying, but yeah, so you're looking at using storytelling to kind of get at some truths then about the world, perhaps.
Yeah, totally. Like, there was one episode that really hit me hard. It was season 1, episode 2, with the whole everybody's working on a treadmill type of thing, generating energy for the higher echelons of society. Because that, more than anything, that seems like what we're going towards. I mean, everybody's isolated right now. We're all, job bound to our houses, and the ones who get out, I mean, their jobs can easily be replaced with technology at the moment. Yeah,
automation's a huge concern, because, I remember I read somewhere, and, there's a lot of just various pieces of information that I read, people I follow on Facebook, on YouTube and everything. And there was a study that pointed out that technology tends to create more wealth, but it also tends to create more wealth inequality, which, I mean, makes sense to me. It makes sense that just from what I observe in the world, that does happen.
But wouldn't it offer more opportunities? I mean, yeah, I guess in the beginning you'd have more disparities, but as with the technology that comes about, now people, on Facebook and all the other social media, you can become influencers, and you can become, just all sorts of things on the internet that you couldn't do 30 years ago.
Yeah, it both creates that wealth inequality, but it also opens up opportunities. I do agree with that, and I think it kind of puts us in a weird place psychologically and existentially, where you have more power, but you also feel like you don't have more power, and in some ways you don't have more power. It's kind of this paradox.
Yeah. And well, I think we're leading towards a place to where we're going to end up redefining wealth in the future. Wealth,
cashless society, perhaps.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So, I mean, wealth really is a stopping point for the progression of knowledge and technology, and just basic sense of what we have of life as it is. If we got rid of cashiers and put in automated cashiers, which are just pretty much robots, it would force a next level of education to where people become engineers and technicians and stuff like that, which are higher paying job tiers.
But the thing is if everybody has to become an engineer, then won't the floor be lowered again? Then everybody will be making starvation wages, but they'll be Scotty from Star Trek.
It does remind me a little bit of now that more people have college degrees or are going to college, it's become less valuable.
Right, now it's a high school. Now it's the equivalent of a high school diploma to have a bachelor's.
Yeah, and people who don't go to college, is like they're kind of Not all of them. It's not really always like that, but there's kind of an underclass element because you can definitely go to trade school and you can make great money at trades, at a trade. But there is something to be said about that. Like value is kind of relative. If I have 2 apples, that's not very valuable unless no one else has apples. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole thing, right? Is like if you automate nominal processes like cashiering or dispensing of merchandise, like you definitely need a human body to come in and repair it. So it's always going to be a necessity. You won't be able to devalue it unless you want a whole.
Yeah. It's like there's always gonna be more jobs to do, and I guess you could say that instead of 10 cashiers, you'll have 1 engineer that just manages all 10 machines or whatever. But then there's still the manufacturing of the machines, but then the manufacturing is more automated too. So it gets complicated. And I guess there's like libertarian people I follow on the internet who, they'll argue, well, no, this has always been an issue. They said that this invention was going to be the death of this industry. It wasn't, and everything. But I do think it's a real concern. I think it's complicated to unravel how to really approach it.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that one industry would be the death of another, because I think we're coming around in a time in society to where like past processes are becoming relevant again. Like even stylization, old styles are coming back into popularity, and it's not that it's taking over, it's that it's being amalgamated with everything else. I kind of have this fun idea to where like instead of making infrastructure boxy and super efficient, maybe we should stylize it more, like how Detroit's the Motor City, making everything stylized towards that like really steampunky, geary, and then like switching over Silicon Valley to more like streamlined, wiry, electronic type of stylization, in which you would you'd instigate a form of tourism to these places more.
Beauty does matter. There's a philosopher named Roger Scruton. Have you ever heard of him?
No.
Well, he's a philosopher out of Britain, and he's generally pretty conservative, and he studied aesthetics, and he actually kind of talks about the importance of beauty and novelty in the world, and he points out that a lot of cities that are designed to be just very practical with the architecture, they tend to fail in the long term because people don't find them inspiring places to live.
Yeah.
And you were gonna say something?
No.
Okay. Oh, it was like, yeah, like people need to feel inspired about their life. Their life needs to feel enchanted somehow. They don't want to feel like a cog in a machine, which is kind of ties into something it always comes to my mind when this subject comes up with automation and machines and this utopian, dystopian kind of stuff. Is that psychologically, people really don't like feeling like they're just another cog in a machine. They have trouble with that. They don't like feeling that they don't have power over their own lives. They don't like being pulled in all these different directions. And so yeah, I think introducing like that sense of, I guess you could call it novelty or beauty or just aesthetics, it is important.
Yeah. I mean, when we start to use people as machines, we get away from the whole humanistic aspect, and we start, well, that's why menial jobs have their wages get lower and lower, and everything else goes up and up, because we as a society treat them like they're supposed to be there, when each individual human can be anywhere that they want to be. Like they don't have to stick to this job. They only have to stick to the job because they need to make a living wage, in which making a living wage is becoming less and less obtainable unless you're willing to sacrifice your whole week for work. Then you need to get away from treating people like machines and start giving them an opportunity to be able to make a better life for themselves through education and through their working process, which is why like switching over menial.
But does everybody want to pursue education? I mean, does everybody, are people, I guess we should try to really clarify, does everybody really care about being a cog or not being a cog, because some people, might just say, hey, I just want to survive. I just want to be, a janitor or whatever, and or they feel like they don't have any opportunities to improve themselves because they're kind of thrust into this. And
now that is an interesting point. Like, if you think about it, if you think about like getting the job process, once you get fired or you become jobless for whatever reason or another, you need to get another job. And
yes.
in getting a new job, there's a training process in which you have to learn. There's no choice in educating yourself. If you want this job, you have to educate yourself with this job. So it just becomes a part of the working process. And so if you were able to take away all the menial jobs that these people could get and tell them, like, look, you need to become an engineer in order to get a job, they're going to end up learning to be an engineer just to get a job at some point or another.
You're saying like the motivations are just laid out in that process. And that's another thing that I kind of talked about, like, because I'm saying like people only feel like feeling like they have like they're just this small thing in this infinite place that they have no control over their destiny, but they also don't want to have too much control.
Yeah.
Because then they're pulled in too many directions. It's like, what do I do? I could go to college and I could study this or that. I could study that for 2 years, 4 years, 6 years. What am I going to do? And in the absence of like a clear path forward and a clear set of motivations, a lot of people, I feel, they don't know how to proceed. They kind of get sucked into the more immediately gratifying things you can do. So they'll end up, a lot of men, for instance, they like to climb the dominance hierarchy of a video game. And it's like, well, I mean, that's fun and everything, but like there comes a point where that can get pathological. And the same thing with, there's all sorts of novelties people pursue. Drugs is one of them, that dopamine. It all kind of comes down to dopamine, which is a motivational system. And in the absence of like that kind of someone holding that carrot at the end of the stick who is going to give you something rewarding for it, that actually does have your better interests in mind. And I'm not saying employers necessarily have people's better interests at heart. It's more so that the set of incentives work so in a way where everybody wins.
Yeah. Well, we would have to normalize education, which, I mean, it kind of is, but at the same time, it's not. There's separating factors. Like when you go into training for a job, do you think of that as education or do you think of that as a job?
Yeah.
And like you would just have to redefine and reintegrate education in a way that like it's a necessity if you want to go for the things that are going to be beneficial to your life. And me and Robert were actually talking earlier that, some people they're just fine with working and surviving and stuff like that. But at the same time, when you're put in jobs to where it doesn't matter that it's you that's working, it just matters that there's a body in place, then,
Well, sorry to interrupt, but I think the thing is that people sort of have different ways of developing their life trajectory. You kind of think about, what do I want my career to be? Some people don't necessarily have careers; they just have jobs. And some people, they have careers, and some people have callings. And in all those situations, you're going from early adulthood, whether it's the end of high school or the end of college or whatever, to through your working adult life to retirement. And the question is, I think part of that education that you're talking about is educating people to kind of have a blueprint for their full life, to kind of say, okay, from 20 to 65, what is it that I want to do that during my waking hours, what is it that I want to do? What value do I want to add to society? And some people, you don't you're not thinking about that because it's just sort of like, well, you know what, it's time to stop, living in mom's basement, and you gotta go down and work at the factory, and I think part of kind of the education that maybe that you're looking for is sort of having that sense of more that deliberativeness where you're kind of planning out, okay, where do you want things to go, and choosing the ways to invest your time and your money so that you can have a more meaningful life.
This made me think of something specifically. I was talking to a guy, Ryan Stewart. He's a person who's he ran for mayor in Trenton here, and we actually are working on a nonprofit together. It's called the McLeod Waterfront Alliance, and it's an environmentalist organization. But anyways, when he was talking to me, he he talked about this idea of behavioral economics, and he gave the example he gave me to kind of explain what that taps into is, so let's say you have a cafeteria at a school, right, and you have kids, they go and they choose the food they want to eat, right, and maybe on the shelf at eye level there's a lot of sweets, candy bars, sugary food and everything, and then the fruit is a little bit below eye level, right, and so of course the kids are going to pick all these sweet foods because they're just right there. So behavioral economics is kind of noting, okay, if you just switch where things are, it's like you're not taking away their agency. The people can choose to eat whatever they want, but you're just making the more preferable outcome a little more likely. Yeah. And that's also what there's a good side and a bad side, right? Because you can that's a good example of it. I mean, who could disagree? Kids shouldn't be eating as many candy bars. It's like, sure, but then social media companies use that to encourage you to stay on Facebook and Twitter for as long as possible.
Yeah, it's a part of social engineering, and some people argue that social engineering is like basically a type of marketing to where people who have the know of what this is psychologically going to do to you, they're going to put it at the forefront of your mind. So yeah, the whole candy bars at eye level over fruit at eye level, but in the same way, there's this equilibrium that we have as human beings that I can't really explain it. I don't think many people can, but people are given all the reason in the world to choose the unhealthy option. It's cheaper, it's more available, all that type of stuff. But you see the rise of veganism and keto diets and people trying to be healthier,
trying to figure it out.
Yeah, the social acceptable behavior versus the socially deviant behavior it's always forever changing, and everybody just wants the best for themselves. And it goes back to the whole education factor is that we need to normalize education, because what we've been being educated with has been the same thing that's been going on for 50, 100, maybe even 200 years now. We get social studies, science.
Well, yeah, and I think the thing about that is also you get the idea.
Sorry, make sure you're close to the mic. I want to make sure people can hear what you're saying. And
thank you. The question is too how you utilize your education, because there are plenty. I can't recall the article, but there was basically something where the A students, the ones who can kind of regurgitate the test questions, they do well in school and they do well, up to a point. And then later on, they're not the innovators. And it's the C students, who had a lot of confidence, who are able to, figure out new ways, new solutions to problems or whatever, and they may become, high school or college dropouts. I mean, Bill Gates, for an example. they're the ones who become the innovators of technology and the success stories. And so the question is, in education, even if I mean, I'm just trying to understand where you're coming from in terms of the structure of it. You know, I think it still comes down to individual initiative in taking opportunities and being able to run with the football.
And do you think maybe it's good to make a distinction between institutionalized education and education as this more general abstract pursuit?
Yeah. I think having it as a general abstract pursuit, not even abstract, just a general pursuit, like I was going on to say, is like we have social studies, science, and all this other stuff that is a very, 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 very base level of knowledge, but we're taught that from kindergarten through 12th grade. That's like 12, sometimes 13 years of knowledge being taught the same stuff. And there's no innovation in there. There's no fundamentals of electrical work. There's no mechanical process work. Only if you choose it as an elective, and which goes into Robert's point of people that choose to go on this path versus people just trying to keep up with the status quo of their environment. If we give people more access and normalize access to the wealth of knowledge that we have now, with the processes that we have now, people would be able to have more access to choose what they're going to, whether they are actively pursuing it or if they're just like trying to go about a general form of surviving life.
And I think that there has to be a sense of less passivity in terms of where you're going in your life. I think that, you know, you parents have to start talking to their kids earlier about, you know, where do you want your trajectory to go? You know, it's not just like, hey, you know, go to school and, you know, get B's and, you know, have fun with your friends and whatnot, but you have to start thinking almost like a scientist in terms of like, you know, what's the input, what input am I putting in and what output am I going to be getting out?
Yeah, well, that's funny that you mentioned that, because when people talk about generational curses or generational deficits, that's kind of why there's passivity in the youth and in people growing up, is because through their generations, their parents had a lot of traumas to deal with, and so these traumas are bequested to their children to deal with, and whether they like it or not, it comes off in a form of passivity, as to where, like, you know, my mom didn't have a lot of those conversations with me. I had to dig myself up out of my own brain and my own feelings to think about what I really wanted out of life. And it's why normalizing education and knowledge is important, is because I didn't know to dig myself out of those generational curses and deficits until I learned a little bit more about psychology and economics and marketing in that sense, because it made me think about why I was doing the things I was doing. Why wasn't I reaching further into my life, further into my experiences and things like that?
Yeah, and you find out that, you know, when I reference those behavioral economics, it's like you find out that the kind of matrix you live in of the what's laid out in front of you, and it's a mixture of unintentional and intentional, just a lot of different forces at play there, are not set up in a way that kind of guides you to success. And you're going to have to deviate from those patterns, and that's pretty frustrating. And I think that's why you know, a few of the perspectives you gave, Rob, strike me as a little more pulling to conservatism. You know, people aren't just going to, if you give them all the resources, they're not going to necessarily make the best choices, and parents need to talk to their kids earlier about what's expected of them. And yeah, like, I think that's why conservatism is making a comeback, and I relate to that very much. And I kind of think, but I don't want to identify as like a conservative necessarily. I just, because there's things I don't like about conservatism, you know, and there's things I don't like about liberalism. And that's kind of what I see here, where we're kind of going back and forth from the more liberal outlook of let's give people choices and power over their life, and then conservatism, which is, well, you're not necessarily going to make the best choices, so you should maybe listen to your elders, listen to authority, and everything. And so that's what I'm kind of sensing here. We're kind of going back and forth between those two.
Well, I
ideas.
think we're also trying to, in terms of in education, we're also needing to have to provide more emotional intelligence, upping the EQ quotient of people, because it's like, people may think that they're making rational choices, rational decisions based on, what opportunities that they have, but instead they're dealing with, like you said, the generational traumas, personal traumas, and figuring out how to take control of their life. How to what extent somebody feels that they're a victim probably dictates, a lot of the trajectory. And then the ones that who feel that they have more control, more autonomy, they can make adjustments. They can pursue greater avenues of success.
Yeah, definitely. The emotional intelligence definitely comes along with it too, because I've grown up in an area to where it's economically and emotionally deficit. Inkster, Michigan specifically, and people do a lot of things that they don't know why they do. They just know that A plus B equals C for them, even though it might turn out not to their best benefit. That's why I see a lot of people going into unsavory means, do a lot of illegal stuff, is because like the system failed them. They didn't have that dialogue with their parents to be like, well, this is something that you should do rather than this. And so they found out that, well, I had this opportunity. It yielded good results for what I needed at the time. Let's keep doing this because it's beneficial.
Yeah, I know Inkster. I mean, it's a lot of it's drug addiction. I mean, it's not, there's a lot of that going on. There's which I think is actually on the rise. I think certain kinds of addictions are on the rise. Not necessarily just drugs, but just like these kind of deceptive patterns of being, but especially in a place like Inkster, any sort of impoverished area, you're going to have more drug abuse.
Yeah, well, you need forms of escape. This is another thing I talked about with Robert earlier. Like if you work 60, 80 hours of your week away, you need some type of escape out of that. And a lot of people use video games, TV. Some people use drugs. Hell, even a lot of higher end people use drugs as an escape too, because it literally pulls you out of your reality.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, if a lot of politicians who are accused of drug abuse, like I could see why. Like they have to deal with lobbyists, they have to deal with marketing their campaign and their lobbyist ideals. They got to deal with the scrutiny that comes with the media and other people who have ideals that are against them. Like that's a lot to deal with. It's a lot more.
The temptation to want to escape is very strong.
Yeah.
And I definitely see that. So in terms of like, you grew up in Inkster, right? You said?
Yeah.
And so and you live in Farmington Hills now. So you're in a better place. Are you? Where you talk about getting involved in politics? Like, where do you? I assume it's gonna be local politics in some level. So,
well, I'm shooting pretty high, and I don't want to reveal that at the moment, but I'm shooting pretty high up there because I want to make a national change. Because to do something just for the area, that'd be great for the people that I know personally, and I would love that for them. Believe me, I would. But on a national scale, things need to change, or else, like, just in these recent years, I almost predicted how things were going to go 5 years ago. I told my friends, and I told them that there's going to be a reason for the government or for the politics in the government to create some type of excuse to keep us away from each other. I didn't know what that was at the time.
That was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Good prediction. I mean,
right.
Yeah, I know there's various books. I honestly, as far as I'm a little embarrassingly behind on my reading of those dystopian, 1984, Brave New World. But I know there's a lot of, those people who made those predictions many years ago. Not that your predictions weren't significant. It's just that there's people are kind of sensing something like, oh, there's those kind of things are going to happen, and lo and behold, 5 years later, this whole COVID-19 thing happened. So, what are your how would you say you view COVID-19?
How I personally view it, I mean, it's emotionally, and a lot of people don't like when you speak from an emotional standpoint, but I'm gonna say emotionally, it feels like it's been engineered for a purpose. For what purpose? Mm-hmm. I don't know, but there's definitely a cause and effect that's going on right now. There's a lot of the cause and effect are coming from past dictators that have basically laid this roadmap for people. I mean, there's a quote by Hitler out there that's like, if you minutely take away people's freedoms in such a volume to where they don't understand what's going on, eventually you're going to be able to eliminate freedom altogether.
Yeah, it's like institutional grooming. It's unsettling. That's the thing is, I've kind of gone back and forth on the whole COVID thing. I initially took it very seriously. I was like, I wouldn't say I was hysterical, but I was outspoken about it. I'm like, stay home from your job, don't go out. I took it seriously because there's people who I followed on YouTube who were saying, get ready for this is coming. And now I'm kind of shifted a lot because there's so many things that just aren't adding up about it. And there's the scientific analysis of it. Like there's people debating whether the COVID-19 actually exists. There's people who are debating how deadly is it, how contagious is it, how does it spread, do masks work. There's all these technical assessments of it, and I guess on that topic specifically, I take issue with the fact that dialogue can't really be that open. There's people being censored on social media who don't go along with the mainstream narrative, and they've turned people into kind of like citizen police of one another.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, so but there's those technical aspects, and I'm like, okay, I don't want to say like that's like those don't matter, but you could have your technical debate, you can have your scientific debate, but you also have to have your human debate. Like, what impact is this having on people's lives? I know people who are old who would fall into that category of don't leave your house, don't interact with people because if you get sick, you're gonna die. Or they're like, I don't have any years left. I want to go out and talk to people because I'd rather not live. I've had multiple old people tell me that. Like, why am I even alive then? This is I got a few retirement years left, and after that, I'm gonna get sick one day, and I'm not gonna be able to handle it.
Yeah, and every second counts for those types of people.
Yeah, and it's like so, and then you just think like, the way it's being exploited by the media is unreal, and I feel almost a little bit foolish for taking it so seriously, but at the same time, like, I feel like I'm a little, I guess, slightly ahead of the curve, on kind of skepticism of it. I don't think masks work. I don't think they work very well.
I mean, if I like to try and look at the numbers as much as they can, even though like numbers can be manufactured. That's, I mean, people might hate me for saying it, but numbers can be manufactured. Unless you're the scientist in the lab doing all the research, the numbers can be manufactured. But as it is right now, they're saying that there's a 2% infection rate, or and an even lower mortality rate, which, I mean, just scales above the flu, in which for the first 6 months of this year, I kept up with COVID deaths and flu deaths, and flu deaths were above COVID deaths.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, and so
that wasn't being reported on either very much. Is like all COVID deaths and
yeah, exactly. So it's like I'm just looking at the numbers and I'm like, okay, so the scary portion is that we don't have necessarily a cure or a Western medicine style of way to deal with it, right? So like they're sensationalizing the scary portion of it, in which all you really have to do is exercise, keep up your nutritional intake. Don't eat a lot of protein, fat. Have a diverse array of vegetables and fruits in your diet, stuff like that, because as we've seen in cancer research, the more protein and sugar you intake, the faster cancer grows. So yeah. And we're a nation of meat eaters. Like that's
okay. So you sound like you're a little critical of the. Are you vegan or vegetarian?
Nah, I'm an omnivore. I mean, I fully lean into what humans are meant to consume. But if you look at physical aspects of the human body, we have very little amount of meat eating teeth in our mouth. And I feel like our diet should be proportionally so. We probably have, 15 to 20% meat tearing teeth in our mouth. So that's how much meat we should probably be consuming. And the rest of it should be fruits and vegetables, nuts, berries, all that type of stuff, because those are all the things that are going to give you antioxidants and nutrients and minerals to help combat any type of viral, bacterial, or foreign growth inside of yourself.
I can agree with some of that. The diet thing's complicated with like, I guess it depends on what you're doing, right? If you're like a bodybuilder, maybe eating more meat is okay. Like for instance, like maybe that's not the best example. I'm trying to think of a better example. Okay, so like if you're specialized to do something, say you're a bodybuilder, like eating meat might have some negative impacts on your health, but you're making that sacrifice to have the muscle growth, right? Just like if you want to get good at something, you're sacrificing maybe getting good at something else. Yeah, perhaps. But I agree with the general point, going back to the COVID thing, that like diet, exercise, a healthy immune system is kind of neglected. It once again, it's like, and here's the thing, is like you can have the scientific debate, but there's also like this kind of more existential idea of like, why is the idea that we have no power to fight this being drilled into our minds? Except for the only thing you can do is not take responsibility for your own health and get that in order. It's comply with these mass orders from the government. That's like, I mean, let's say, like, whether you think the masks work, whether you think that the social distancing, the lockdown is justified, it's like, obviously having a strong immune system also helps. So why are both not being pushed? Yeah. Why is only one thing primarily being pushed, and to such a politicized and polarizing degree? Well,
Western medicine is all about the one pill that cures everything. That's what Western medicine is. They don't really you talk to a doctor, your family care physician, and you ask them about getting advice from a dietitian for solving like issues like diabetes or anything that involves a deficit in nutrients. They'll probably scoff at you and prescribe you some medicine. Mm-hmm. I personally went to a doctor for acid reflux, and it wasn't my family care physician. I did it on a whim every few times, but I went to the same doctor like within a year, and diagnosis was acid reflux. He gave me a pill. He told me come back in 3 months. Came back in 3 months. The problem didn't get any better, so he prescribed me another pill. Told me to come back in 3 months. And I was like, well then, And ever since I've started changing my diet and keeping these general concepts in mind, is limiting my protein intake and having a diversity of fruits and vegetables in my diet, I have not experienced acid reflux since then. And it's been years.
There's a saying, if you don't make time for your wellness, you'll have to make time for your illness.
That is very true.
And I can kind of I can relate to, like diet and whatever. It's just, and part of it is actually, the irony is the fact that I grew up in a well-to-do neighborhood, whatever. We had a lot of rich food, which now I have to deal with, certain health issues because my diet was not balanced, and I look at the amount of pills that I have to take at my not too advanced age of 36, and it's sort of like, okay, I'm gonna have to learn how to shop and not go to the drive-through in order to if I want to get off these damn pills. And that is a time and thinking investment in terms of what is it that you are willing to do for to kind of sacrifice the so-called convenience, because it's very convenient to have somebody kind of cook something for you that's savory and salty and sugary and whatever, and you just put it in your mouth and whatever. But
it's all the endorphins in the head.
Yeah, especially and also when you have a job that you're not all too keen about, you just sort of you want that escape.
It is its own escape. It's like this. Okay, I can deal with this job as long as I get this food afterwards.
Right.
I noticed that I've done that before at many points in my life. If I'm doing something I really don't like doing or resent doing, it's like, okay, well, I can make myself feel better with food.
Mm-hmm.
And and it's interesting, because we talking about the COVID thing and then going to like this more, kind of like personal, like what are how personal health and responsibility. Yeah, that's what I take issue with isn't the COVID thing, doesn't it kind of feel like this an even more macro level of like your doctor basically telling, just take this pill, don't just do what I tell you to do, don't figure it out for yourself, and you have to be reliant on like this sophisticated thing that I give you. Because I went to a doctor and he said, like, you have hypertension, you have like your blood pressure is too high, and he prescribed me a pill. And I actually argued with him. I said, well, why don't I just lose weight and eat more greens? He's like, I don't know, man, maybe you won't do it. It was a really funny conversation, because I was kind of a I wasn't like a dick, I was just sort of I was a contrarian, right? And he just was like, no, he's like, I have so many patients, and he got like dismissive. He's like, I have so many patients and they never do it, Yeah. And I'm like, okay, well, you don't seem to respect your patients very much then, or that's kind of what it feels like to me. And that's I almost feel like the government's like, you're really gonna go for a jog and keep your immune system high? No, just put your mask on. Come on, like, maybe not the most potent metaphor, but yeah, there's just this idea of like, it feels disempowering. It feels disempowering to and it's also easier. It also makes you it's easy to just be you're unhealthy, you're vulnerable, and you go, okay, just wear a mask and stay away from me.
Yeah, wear a mask and you won't get the disease on everybody else. Right?
Yeah. There's that. That's a whole mess too. Like, it doesn't. I mean, it's a piece of fabric. Why does it only work one way? Yeah, that's weird to me.
Well, I mean, because there's a little bit of science behind it. Like breathing out you breathe out at so many miles per hour, and all the microns of spit and saliva go forward, whereas when you breathe in, it's ambient, and you got those holes in the side, and there's more airflow going in through there than the holes in the front, right? Mm-hmm. But it is a prevention method, but it works like this. If somebody with COVID is breathing in a room for hours, COVID's all over that room. If you have a mask on, it's not going to protect you from that COVID-infested room. But if you have COVID going into a clean room, it'll protect against infecting the area, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. Although, so that's interesting. I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, because I was thinking about the mask. I've been thinking about it on and off, and so from what I understand, there's two ways that the virus spreads, right? There's aerosol airborne, which means it's in air particles, right?
Yeah.
And then there's also spreading through water droplets.
Yeah.
And so those are two mechanisms of spread that it's thought to have. And I think this is from a video on BitChute I watched of a doctor basically taking a hit of a vape pen. He puts his mask on, he breathes out, all the vape smoke goes out the sides and the top.
Yeah.
And I think, okay, well, those are all air particles. It's like if this virus spreads it's aerosol airborne. To me, to the layman, who I'm smart, I'm intelligent, but I'm also not like a scientific expert. I look at that, go, okay, well, if it's aerosol airborne, then the masks don't do much of anything. How could they? It's the air is going in and out. Instead of going in front of you, it's going to the sides. It's still going to fill up a room with your air.
Yeah.
It's so the mask can only work if it's water droplets. But then I think water droplets, like, I mean, how much? I mean, of course, there's spit coming out of your mouth when you're talking. Of course, when you cough, but like, how much? I mean, unless you're, that's saying a mask would protect you, other people, if you were coughing a lot. But if you're coughing a lot, just that's if you're sick, just stay home. It's like that. That's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Or if you're coughing a lot, cough in your sleeve. Don't just be coughing out out there.
Yeah.
And then if you're talking to people, I mean, the distance we're at right now, how much spit is really just like shooting right across the room, So that's where I'm like, how effective is this really? I see people riding their bikes with their mask on. I'm like, that's ridiculous to me.
Well, driving.
Yeah, right. It's
yeah. I saw a bunch of parents picking up their kids from school. They're standing out and you're outside, and your kid is coming up to you, and they're wearing a mask, and you're wearing a mask, and it's like, you're outside, yo. And if asymptomatic spread is not the most. It's symptomatic spread is the most common way of spread.
Yeah.
So and that tells me people aren't really thinking about it for themselves. They're just sort of going along with it, just like they go along with what their doctor tells them. It's like, oh, I got to take a pill, and it's like,
yeah. Well, think about it this way: if the natural physiological human response to danger is like, okay, so what there was this example and explanation that was perfect. All right, so imagine you're a caveman. This is before technology. You just had you just had sticks and rocks to make a fire, whatever, right? You're a caveman. You go outside in the dark, and there's this shadowy figure in your peripheral vision that kind of looks like a saber-toothed tiger. Are you going to investigate the shadowy figure and make sure it's a saber-toothed tiger or a rock, or are you just going to run for the hills?
Yeah, I see where you're going with that. Yeah, and people are not going to investigate it for them. They're not going to risk it. Go like, well, does a mask work?
Yeah.
Let's find out.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's take it off. And but at the same time, it's like, I haven't really came across anyone who, when I talked about the aerosol airborne and water droplets, I haven't come across anyone that's actually told me, well, actually, here's why you're wrong. They go, no, the studies show. They always like the studies. You can find studies that show that going out and protesting doesn't spread COVID, but going to a bar does.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't buy that. I'm thinking just, it's like academia can lie. There's lies and there's corruption and there's making up numbers and shifting them and everything. So,
well, I mean, there's definitely a science to being aerosol airborne versus on droplets, and really, it's the dumbest, most simplest science too. It's just something that they don't tell you because it's the same doctor thing. Like, they don't feel like they have enough time to tell you, and they just want you to
patient coming in. Okay.
Yeah, they just want you to believe in their 8 years of experience in school that they paid $300,000 for, whatever. But look, difference between aerosol airborne and water particulate transferable is the size of the disease. Literally, it's the size of the virus involved. It's somewhere around 0.03, 0.05 microns, which every mask that you wear has a micron rating that it's able to protect against. whatever.
So you're saying COVID has you said 0.03 to 0.05 microns?
Yeah.
And so that's the size of COVID, and then the mask is supposed to be to protect against that size. What are the sizes of other diseases? Is that about smaller or bigger than other diseases?
Generally, viruses and diseases go between 0.03 and 0.08, I think, microns. I think bacteria is a little bit bigger. But,
I'd imagine bacteria is bigger.
Yeah. But essentially, the smaller it is, the more likely it is able to get in the air. And the difference between aerosol airborne and water particulate transferable, you got to think that there's a relative humidity around you all the time. There's water around you at every point in your day, in your life. There's water in the air as we speak. If it's small enough to get on the relative humidity, then it's able to be transferred through the air.
Well, my question is why, well, a couple of things. One, why weren't we drilling or were we drilling for something like a catastrophe like this to happen when it was already happening elsewhere in the world? And also, kind of the flip side of that, what happens when we are seemingly out of the woods, if we're out of the woods one day, and then we have to go back to this because there's another wave? I mean, how are people going to just say, screw the masks, we're just going to get the herd immunity and whatnot? And how is that going to affect the stock market and the economy and all that?
Well, it's the reason why we weren't drilling for this is because, well, economies are all about the business as usual platform. Like if it doesn't affect business as usual, why bring it up? Like it's a lot of the reason why I believe Donald Trump didn't impress how important it was when it began with, and he was just saying it's safe, it's not a big deal, anything like that. He's a businessman. What do you do if you were a businessman? What do you think the response would be from your employees if you said, if you told them that the business was shutting down in 3 months, but you needed things to keep operating for that 3 months? Mm-hmm. They would quit. Yeah. They would quit, find a new job. You don't want them to do that, so you don't tell them.
Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of politicians do that too. There's there's videos of Nancy Pelosi saying no, don't, keep going out, go to Chinatown and everything, quit panicking. And but Donald Trump is definitely he's got the most attention for his early on downplaying of it. And I oddly enough, I find myself at first, that's the thing, now I find myself relating to him more in terms of come on, guys, that's the thing. There's just, it just seems like we're just never going to end this, and I'm thinking about that point you made about you kind of made about the mask thing, where it's okay, so the virus is a certain level of small, and apparently the masks can block that.
Yeah.
But wouldn't they already see the mask would block that? I'd have to think about that more. But it's still
so. There's a good example of it. Back in the last pandemic that happened in America, I forgot what the virus was, but there was Spanish flu pandemic. The types of masks that they had around that time, and they said, wear your mask, they were using gauze for masks. Think about how porous gauze is. It doesn't...
Gauze.
Gauze.
Like the stuff you wrap around...
Yes. Yeah, they just had layered up gauze.
Yeah, that stuff is not meant to protect you at all.
Yeah.
It's just...
The pores are huge.
Yes.
Yeah, so you're going to get sick regardless, and you're going to increase the... At that time, you would increase the availability of infection because having something covering your mouth also keeps your lungs and your airway more moist in general. You're also slightly consuming more carbon dioxide than you would usually, but that's not too much of a big factor unless you have like COPD or asthma or something like that.
Or if you're doing something physically intense, which is why people riding their bikes and jogging with a mask on is so unreal to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's why a lot of people still got affected back when the Spanish flu pandemic happened, is because they had gauze for masks.
Yeah. There's just not enough to cover that.
And then they also probably felt safer in terms of interacting with everybody rather than just isolating.
Yeah,
and
that too. So like people
they would
with
interact,
masks,
and it would be like going around with Swiss cheese over your mouth.
Yeah, exactly. We're the mask party. We can party together.
Oh yeah, it's like the you're talking about kind of a sense of false security, like we're protected and everything.
Yeah. But regardless, like your point is solid. Is that like if one person who is infected with COVID wears a mask and they're partying around people with other masks, he is putting every single person that he's around in danger, regardless of wearing the mask.
Yeah, I mean, it's the mask is not the magic cure, which I mean, people haven't really exactly claimed it was. Yeah. But it's just that weird like policing, that weird like wear your mask, like, and just the anger, and for something that doesn't seem to really work all that well. Because the point you made is like, I mean, you know, I have to think about it a little more and look into it more, but it's like, still doesn't sound like to me like it's a perfect solution. It sounds like to me it's just like a mitigating kind of thing, and even like for something that that's the other thing is most people don't even have symptoms. What kind of disease is that? Like a disease where most people don't have symptoms, but then that does tie into the fact that, from what I understand, once again, is the somewhat intelligent layman that I am, is like you can have lots of viruses in your body at any given time, and you're not getting sick from them. And the reason is because the virus has to multiply enough in order to actually infect you and, you know, start kind of interrupting your body in that way. And your immune system could be successfully fighting it off, and it could just be there. It could be there for a long time. And I even feel it when I start getting sleep deprived. I'm not eating well. I'm stressed out. I can feel myself starting to kind of get sick.
Yeah. Like
that happens, you know, from time to time. And it's like, then I take care of myself a little more and it goes away. It's like, because probably I feel like because in that stressed out state, my immune system is just kind of having trouble keeping up. Just like if I'm doing weightlifting and I'm tired, I'm gonna suck at weightlifting.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I guess it's and that's so the PCR test, right? From what I read, is like, you know, what it does, it finds the virus in your body by amplifying. It takes a sample and then amplifies that sample, sometimes to the tune of millions. It makes tons of copies of that sample so that it can actually see any sort of genetic material, and then that's how they can kind of detect the virus. So it's almost like taking a really, really faint audio signal and blowing it up, amplifying it by hundreds, you know, multitudes of hundreds, in order to actually hear what's going on. And it's like, well, that's how you're diagnosing this. Like that's not how. Once again, because as I said, like from what I understand, you can have viruses in your body all the time. So that's where all these asymptomatic cases come from. And
yeah, I imagine, I haven't done the research on this, but I imagine the asymptomatic cases are a person who's infected with COVID whose immune system is successfully fighting it off. Because and then symptomatic people are ones who are fully infected and in the throes of it. So
then it begs the question, like, how infectious are asymptomatic people? They're not coughing. It's maybe not really. I mean, maybe it's still in their saliva, it's in their throat, but like, how much of that is just pouring out into the environment? You know,
well, it's just a case of how, you know, the percentage of how much of the virus is involved in the body, or if the virus is. From what I've read, it starts in the lungs and then it spreads because it spreads on water particles, whether small enough to be called aerosol particles or big enough to be called particulates, you know. And so you breathe those in, and the lungs is the first place it goes to. And what else I've researched it, is that it doesn't necessarily do anything to you like any other virus. It just instigates the response of your immune system, and if it multiplies enough, it basically makes your immune system kill you.
Yeah, that's okay. That's what I heard. I heard, like, there's these weird cases of like people who are like 30 years old dying of it, and it's like because their immune system is just in this weird like feedback loop of so
and if
that
you
does
get,
make sense.
If you get too sick, and this isn't just with COVID, this is with any disease, virus, if you get too sick, your immune system will start to kill so many cells that it just starts to kill parts of your body.
It's kind of like, it makes sense.
Yeah,
it's like total warfare.
Yeah,
you get you get over too much more collateral damage than actual like targets. Yeah,
and I don't know. It's the way to fight that is to increase your immune system by proper diet, and like working out definitely helps. It increases the functionality of your whole body's functions.
I think of two things specifically too. Is like, so maybe what's the case is a lot of people who are getting this virus, it's like a feedback. It's all downhill from there. Like once you're on that respirator, people like have a higher chance of dying because it's like your immune system's maybe this strong, right? And it's having trouble fighting off the virus. Well, if you're sitting in a hospital, this depressing, stressful hospital, and you're just eating crummy hospital food. I've been in a hospital before. The food's not very good, but then also you're not exercising, so your already compromised immune system is down.
Yeah,
and then the virus just keep there, and like so, it's kind of like how if you hurt your hand, you hurt your arm or whatever, and then you put it in a bandage, it's like you're not using it. You know what I mean? Your arm gets weaker from not being used, and so. Oddly enough, maybe not going on a respirator would be better. Maybe like, but that's the thing. It's like that kind of catch-22 situation. But that's an interesting part, and also made me think of I have a friend of mine who doesn't believe the virus actually exists. And he made a point, and I haven't verified or anything, but it makes a lot of interesting points. He said that there have been cases where doctors will diagnose someone with a disease and go, you have 6 months to live. That person will die in about 6 months, and then they'll find out later on that via like an autopsy that person never even had that disease. It was like they just believed it.
Psychosomatic.
Yeah, psychosomatic. Yeah, exactly. And
well, if you want to go back in history into when we were really in the throes of medical research and discovery, doctors or licensed doctors would be given orders from the government or the medical institution as to how to handle patients. They would initiate secret placebo tests with people to where they would literally infect certain patients with certain diseases, and then give them the supposed cure, and then give others a placebo. And
the placebo effect is real. It actually does trigger a bit of a response from your body to fight things. And I read somewhere a while ago that's because your body does have kind of like the biological equivalent to like a rainy day fund of energy. Yeah. Where there's like some extra stuff that back there that it saves for times of stress, and the placebo effect seems to trigger the release of those energies.
Yeah, it's working with cannabis as I have in my life. There's there's cannabinoids in your body.
Like naturally occurring?
Yeah, naturally occurring. Consuming cannabis increases the amount of cannabinoids in your system, but essentially cannabinoids are there for receptor repair, right? Mm-hmm. And so like certain receptors in your body and in your brain, different cannabinoids repair different receptors, just like different nutrients do different things for your body. So, if those receptors are damaged or not working the best, then your body's not going to have the best reaction to what those receptors are meant for. And it's not necessarily cannabinoids that trigger them or keep them in functionable repair. And people have also found cannabinoids in different fruits and vegetables other than cannabis.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's definitely possible that something like that can occur with the placebo effect. All of a sudden, your reserves of cannabinoids get to work, and I'm not saying it's cannabinoids in general or specifically. I'm just saying that there's a reserve of some type of function in your body that may increase your body's functionality to be able to fight against that with the correct emotional and mental response.
You know, it's interesting about that is, so, going back to the whole doctor idea, just listen to your doctor, don't listen to your doctor, or there's that kind of idea coming from the mainstream narrative, like don't go with your own judgment, go with our judgment. And I think talking to you, I'm like, I'd be more comfortable listening to what you have to say about this than a doctor, because a doctor would be like, put on a mask, a face shield, stay in your house, you know what I mean, like, so, and to my knowledge, you're not a you're not a licensed doctor.
No, I'm a layman like you, man, but I've done a lot of research to make sure the wool doesn't get pulled over my eyes.
Because, and that's the whole thing is, there's value to there's value to people who are smart and willing to do some research, who aren't just part of an institution that is kind of dominated by one way of thinking.
Yeah. And like making this kind of full circle that's why like normalizing education is a big thing. Is like, you shouldn't feel like once you get out of school that you're done learning. Like you should always be trusting in your own self-knowledge. You should always be striving to increase your capacity to know things, because it creates situations like this to where, like, to me, I obviously feel like there's some type of agenda with COVID going on.
Yeah, whether it's real, not real, somewhere in between, there's people using it as part of an agenda. Yeah, I believe that.
Definitely. I mean, they're coming up with funds. Along with COVID and being in lockdown, people's emotions flared up, and you got things like the Black Lives Matter movement happening, and then like certain political figures, I'm not going to say who, and I don't even think I know exactly who did this. They created donation campaigns for the Black Lives Matter movement and didn't donate to the movement or donate to the sentiment of the movement. They just took the money and
like the Act Blue donation, all that hairy stuff, and people's compassion and sense of like social engagement is being co-opted by other people. And
because people more times than not, individuals generally want to do good for society. It's organizations that start to create the conundrum and create the maleficent type of environment that goes along with not trusting these things.
So it pays to be especially vigilant in crazy times.
It makes me think too. I'm glad. Mentioning you're not part of an institution that's dominated by an ideology. You're just a smart person who's operating outside of that, and that's valuable. I often think that there's kind of like there's a sense of like brain drain from like communities where that person who would ordinarily be just a smart person, and you can talk to about things as just a normal individual to another individual, gets pulled away to some university somewhere, study, and his head's in a book for 8 years. He just gets all these ideas get in his head, like he kind of gets indoctrinated because there's prevailing ideologies in those institutions, and then that community loses a smart person who's a real member of that community, and that guy's living in a $300K a year home somewhere, in the metaphorical ivory tower, just looking down on people. And it does pay to be vigilant. One thing I read about recently is what do you think of the Bill Gates thing going on? That was a saucy one.
Wait, Bill Gates?
Bill Gates. I watched a documentary on him through the Corbett report, which is, that they get into all sorts of conspiracy theories and everything. But, Bill Gates, he's kind of spearheading the vaccination process. And, he declared in 2010, this will be the decade of vaccines.
Yeah.
And, a lot of ties to pharmaceutical companies. And I mean, that's the other thing is like, I don't like pharmaceutical companies. I've never liked pharmaceutical companies. And now they're going to save us, right?
So what's the point of the conspiracy that you drew from? Because I have a
basically what he, he has a long history. He's a software programmer, entrepreneur, and everything. And then later on, he got into doing these vaccinations and kind of public health, right? And he started kind of using a lot of wealth
with the intention of population control. Is that what you're going with that?
Yeah, that's one of the ideas that he talks about. Well, basically, to give you like the quick history is like, he started in the third world delivering these vaccines, funding the developing these vaccines to address diseases in the third world. But then there were some companies he worked with that started integrating identification systems into those vaccines. One of them was like, say you, it's like a little thing with a bunch of spikes on it, and you put it on your wrist, and it injects the vaccine, but it also leaves like an indent in your skin that serves as a barcode, so people can identify you as having been vaccinated. That was one of the things that he did, and then he's also pushed for a lot of efforts to. Because using those identification efforts to get people kind of on a grid. In India, for instance, he was trying to, get people away from this kind of individual to individual underground economy, just cash and bartering and such, and get people more on like a grid with identification and tracking the transactions so you can tax the money. And there's value to that. Like you want an infrastructure, right? If you want your country to be sophisticated enough to have an infrastructure, you're going to have tax revenue, obviously. But at the same time, there's something kind of creepy about it, right? He, and as the documentary pointed out, he's not an elected official. He's just a really rich person.
Yeah.
He's not really.
Well, let me ask you this: do you know the year in which he started investing in vaccines and medical industry?
The specific year I don't know. All I know is that 2010 was that decade of vaccines proclamation.
Okay. So the correlation I make, and this isn't with Bill Gates specifically, I just know that about 5 years ago, maybe not 5 years ago, maybe 3, they publicly announced that they've created nanomachines, and it was a thing.
We've created. Hello, guys. We've created nanomachines. Also, aliens are real.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
But the correlation between nanomachines and specifically having a vaccine being required, I think is too coincidental to ignore. Because if nanomachines that are about the size of your cells the purpose was to destroy cancerous cells and repair healthy cells in your body and everything like that. But with the way technology is and the amount of information that you can fit on a semiconductor and stuff like that, what else can it do? Can it be a transceiver? Can it be a receiver? Can it be something that can...
you could do all sorts of things with that. Yeah. Because you're talking about like a little machine that can go inside your body, right?
Yeah. Or millions of little
machines. It's like, okay, now we're going to have... What is it? What would be like techno-biological terrorism? As a possibility, right? Like now you have biological viruses. Now you have a mix. Now you have technological viruses that go in your body. Here's what I'd say. Is with like Bill Gates, it's like there's a lot of people who kind of like say these like it's like Bill Gates is an evil population control eugenicist. Pedophile, rapist, like all the just the doomsday stuff, which if that's true, then like that's true. I can't deny it, but at the same time, I'm not eager to just jump to that. So maybe I could I'll level with you, Bill. Like I appreciate that you're trying to stomp out these like weird diseases in the third world. but don't sterilize me, bro.
Yeah, exactly.
like you seem like you kind of you're getting a little ahead of yourself there. Like,
yeah, and so
you need people to keep you need people to do research and look into stuff to keep weird people like him in check.
Yeah, and see, so my general correlation between nanomachines and what Bill Gates is doing is he's a tech guy investing in vaccines. Just saying, like there's no specific correlation, but when tech people start to invest in vaccines, especially around a time which there's talk about a vaccine for COVID being lawfully required, I think it's something that we should look at. And
yeah, I wouldn't. Don't force me to take a vaccine. No way. No, like that's a violation of my bodily autonomy to make me take a vaccine.
Yeah.
Or to de facto make me take a vaccine through, well, if you don't have the vaccine, you can't get on this airplane. Well, if you don't have the vaccine, you can't go to this thing. You can't get this job. It's like, okay,
Yeah, and unless you're, like I said, unless you're one of those scientists in the lab seeing what's going into it and how it's made and everything, us as the people, we don't really know. Yeah. And the amount of people who are in those labs that do know is extremely small compared to the rest of
Plus, what about
society.
the interactions that the vaccines, I mean, if you're not already healthy or if you've got some other health, hypertension, diabetes, whatever. I mean, what makes the vaccine one size fits all?
And see, it won't be. Just like our Western medicine concept of a cure-all, like it's gonna kill some people because of their own.
When you get nerds
anatomy
on like a track like this, some of them never stop.
Yeah.
Like, you ever play like Dungeons and Dragons with like a real like nerdy guy who's like this? Like, he's just like, I have a vision that's gonna go. I've never even played Dungeons and Dragons, so I'm kind of full of it right now. But like, it's just like, but they like these people will like program functioning CPUs in Minecrafts. They're kind of control freaks.
Yeah, I've seen those.
But I love them though.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, I get what you're saying. You do have those people that will do it just because they can do it.
Yeah, and also he's investing in it, so there's a conflict of interest right there. Like, what if his vaccines fail? What if no one buys his stupid Minecraft server CPU? He can stand to lose a lot of money, and he likes his money
my worry is, what if that doesn't matter to him?
Oh yeah, it could just be something in here. It's more than just the conflict of interest. It's more like nefarious, perhaps. Yeah. He wants to control people.
Not necessarily nefarious, just that whole concept of, I can do it, let's see if I can do it. Or I think that I can do it, so let's try. Yeah,
I mean, some men, they're like, how many women can I sleep with in my life? Some men, how many people can I vaccinate? Can I get them to buy my vaccines?
That's a very interesting analogy. Vaccinate.
Yeah. I mean, it's that. Well, men are the same friend of mine who. I love someone's. The same friend of mine who said that COVID doesn't exist. He goes in deep in these conspiracy theories. He said that anything you can think of, no matter how awesome or stupid it is, there's a man somewhere getting really good at it.
Yeah.
Like, there's just a man who's just made it his mission to get really good at collecting every type of string in the world. It's like,
well,
good for you.
I mean, literally, we have the Center for Disease Control, right?
Mm-hmm.
They just have like nation-ending viruses in their labs, and I mean, they might have systems that are in place so that they don't get out.
Yeah, but you saw nuclear facilities falling apart, and you had things can go wrong.
It's there. We have world-ending things like in our grasp at this moment, and as we've proven over the many decades of society, is that science fiction is only science fiction until somebody creates that shit.
Yeah, that's true. We envision it, we dream it before it becomes a reality. So
yeah, I mean, have you seen the dude that made a real lightsaber?
No, I haven't.
Yeah,
it's plasma, isn't it?
Yeah, they made a real plasma lightsaber, and it was.
And is it self-contained? I mean, well, I only seen pictures. I haven't seen the whole demonstration. But.
It's not necessarily self-contained at this moment because they use a concept called laminar flow, which is just like a flow of fluid in which it's almost reflective and clear. You know, they use that concept with two different types of gas, and they just make the gas shoot out at such a rate to where so you know how a blowtorch has that little flame at that length. They basically made a blowtorch that could shoot out a lightsaber length flame like that.
And it's like limited.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't go further.
Yeah, like it looks like a lightsaber for a good like 2-3 feet, but then at the tip you see the flame like sputtering.
That's actually kind of cooler, honestly.
Right.
Thank you everyone for tuning in to another episode of Not Black and White. My name is Jason. This is Rob, and this is Josh, our guest.
Yes.
And he's actually going to be running for political office in some form in the future.
As a Green Party candidate.
And so if you like what you're hearing here, and I mean clearly I think you're quite an intelligent person. You've done a lot of reading and thinking about this kind of stuff, and so I'm excited to see you
Googling.
get involved. You Googling and everything. Yeah. So I'm excited to see you pursue that goal. You know, I think we need more people getting involved.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to be a moderate because the liberal and conservative parties they lean too much into their own way, and
it's very refreshing. I can sense that you're here to stick to what you believe in. You're not here to attach a bunch of polarizing. Because I would even talk about identity politics, but that's something I criticize a lot. But we didn't even really talk about a lot of that stuff. You're more focused on
solutions,
humanity, and it's very refreshing. And so, I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you.
We'd love to have you back on when you're, more fully formed and ready to go.
Yeah, hopefully it's sooner than later. And like, share, and subscribe to these guys. When I have a social media, I'll let you know and be back on here.
Cool. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Take care.